So it is an incredible privilege to be able to attend TEDxTokyo for the third time. I really wanted to be here to support Japan, support Todd and Patrick and their amazing TEDxTokyo team. This TEDx event marks the first third generation TEDx event. And it was 2 years ago we launched TEDx as a little experiment, and TEDxTokyo was only the second event to happen on a global basis. And we've now had almost 2,000 TEDx events around the world. And so recently, TEDx organizers have been coming up to me and asking me if I'd tell the TEDx story, if I'd tell how this became a movement, or what they are calling a movement. And I've sort of been reluctant to do so because I wasn't convinced this amazing thing that is TEDx was ready to be called a movement. And more importantly, I wasn't sure it was really my story to tell, but really these amazing organizers around the world and their teams of volunteers who have spent hundreds of thousands of hours organizing these TEDx events, and who we at TED are quite honestly incredibly in awe of. It's Mazarat's story. Mazarat, who against all odds hosted TEDx Sheikh Vakti in a rural village in India, where the elders of the village went to every means to try to prevent this event from happening because they felt threatened by a conference about ideas. It's Arija's story. Arij hosted the first co-ed event on her all-women's campus in Pakistan. It's Liat and Hanan's story, a Palestinian and a Jew who hosted TEDx Holy Land. It's Rodrigo and Helda's story, who hosted TEDx Amazonia for 600 people on a floating hotel in the middle of the Amazon rainforest that was themed A Better Life for All Beings. And it's Jim's story, and it's Walter's story, and it's Tomas' story, and it's Patrick and Todd's story. And so by the time I'd been asked the 9th or 10th time to tell the story, I decided it was a story that did need to get told, and I needed to decide if I could tell it or if I had the right to tell it. And if I was going to tell the story, I wanted to find a word to describe this incredible group of people around the world that were motivated by nothing but ideas. And so I started off by going to the dictionary and looking up the word movement, a trend in various fields or social categories, a group of people with a common ideology who try together to achieve general goals. And while I guess this could somewhat describe what I was seeing on the ground, I was hoping that what we were creating was a little deeper than a trend. Tamaguchi's a trend, baggy pants are a trend, platform shoes are a trend. And so I'd inadvertently been calling this group of people a tribe, which is a social division of people, a family, a group with something in common. And this was definitely a little closer. I traveled to a lot of TEDx events, and there is this sort of common ideology or philosophy that binds both the organizers and the people who attend these TEDx events. They are a tribe of sorts. They're people who believe that great ideas can change the world. But I still needed the word. But in the absence of the word, the process of trying to figure out a way to describe the TEDx community had made me more comfortable with talking about it. So when Patrick asked me, I said yes. And so now the challenge really began. How do you tell the TEDx story? And how do you describe this amazing, extraordinary, passionate, committed community around the world? This is a story of diversity. It's a story of openness. It's a story of risk-taking. It's a story of trust. It's a story of the power of a brand. And it's a story of inspiration and aspiration. And so I've worked for many companies, both big and small. And the underlying philosophy of most of these companies throughout my career has been that of control. And it takes a really extraordinary leader to let go of control, to trust in the power of the people, to give away a brand, and trust in a global community to maintain its integrity. And at the backbone of all of this is Chris Anderson and his underlying philosophy of radical openness. And radical openness really informs a lot of what we do every day at TED and a lot of the decisions that get made. And I think about this often, and it's usually when one of three things happen. Either I get an amazing email from a TEDx organizer, I get an email from somebody in the community or somebody who attended a TEDx event or a speaker. I have some major compliance issue. As you can see here, they're using the TED logo instead of the TEDx logo. Or I get an email from somebody who attended a TEDx event whose expectations have not been met. And so generally when I get the when I get one of these types of emails, I try to remind myself that TEDx is a movement, a tribe, a global community of almost 2,000 events that was launched without a legal document. Yes, we do have a 20-page toolkit and 30 pages of branding guidelines, but it's a community that's a volunteer community that's not being paid. It's a community that is self-policing, and it's a movement that is built on trust. And these people believe in the power of the TED brand and the TED brand alone. And so this brings me to my next point. I recently wrote a grant proposal. And in addition to an org chart, a completely normal request, which they wanted, they also asked me for a 5-year plan. And so I went back to when Chris and I were first discussing the idea of TEDx. And at the time, we knew 3 things. We knew that people were connecting in this amazingly powerful way to the TED Talks online. We would get emails like this one here. We also knew that more and more people were coming together in groups and communities and schools and watching TED Talks and having a conversation around them. And then more and more people were coming to us at TED and saying, can you please hold an official TED conference in our city or country? And for the small TED team, that idea was a very hard concept to scale. And we had 5 core questions. How could we capture the passion for TED around the world? How could we capture this passion we were seeing for TED Talks online? And how could we infuse whatever we were creating with a local authenticity and sensibility and a sense of integrity? And how could we tap into these local voices in an authentic way? And most importantly, how could we give away the TED brand while still protecting it in some way? And so this is really where I started in 2008, with Chris Anderson's blessing and the philosophy of a moral compass and radical openness. And the questions were really endless. How much do you give away? How much do you protect? How much do we need to support the system? At the time, I created a 1-year plan, and it went something like this. Version 1, we launch, and maybe there would be 20 to 30 small events that happen over the course of the first year. And version 2, I damage the TED brand, I get fired, I possibly have a lot of frequent flyer miles, and you can fill in the rest. But actually, I didn't dwell on the latter for a number of reasons. I truly believed in Chris and his underlying vision. My passion for the TED brand, in the 90s, I'd write into my job contract that I'd only take a job if they sent me to TED. My commitment to my personal philosophy, that being, may you live an interesting life. And in a moment in time where everything from courseware to curriculum was being open sourced, why not a community around a great brand? And finally, I'd always tried to find jobs that were somewhat on the cutting edge, whether it was running around South Africa as a journalist with one of the first high band 8 cameras, or working for Microsoft in the 90s when we were trying to create a broadband entertainment network that connected through a 14.4 modem. Not possible. But as this concept developed and the ideas emerged, the most crucial and significant thing I learned, and again, I learned this from Chris Anderson, is listen to the community, listen to the voices on the ground, and no one else. And there were definitely the naysayers, there were choruses of cants, those who thought what we were doing was completely mad and that we were risking the brand. And there were those that thought we may even just completely destroy the brand. And so what I tried to do is check in consistently and continuously with the voices on the ground, really pay attention to the cultural differences and be sensitive to the cultural differences. And I presumed I knew nothing of what they were going through and their challenges and their needs. And we created this feedback loop which informed the guidelines that were ever evolving and eventually became what are now the TEDx rules for a TEDx license. And so while it's clear how TEDx now came about, I'm still humbled with the challenge of adequately describing the complexities and the achievements of this incredible global tribe. And my team of 4's daily obsessions have morphed from how do we create systems and infrastructures and back-end systems and naming guidelines to manage this amazing growing community, to how do we paint the real story of this eclectic, passionate, and gloriously mad global tribe. The 100 plus Youth Day events, TEDx events that are for and by young people. The TEDx in a Box program, which is a TEDx program that goes into developing communities and underprivileged communities. TEDx Change, which is a strategic relationship with the Gates Foundation. TEDx University Day in China that happened in the course of 6 weeks, where we had almost 80 TEDx events happening in one day on universities across China, and so on, and so on, and so on. And so while the numbers and statistics do tell part of the story, and we have a lot of numbers and a lot to analyze, and there are a huge amount of lessons learned, and I could spend an entire presentation on the lessons learned, I've become increasingly obsessed with what I believe are the real story, the real TEDx story. And that is the amazing human connections, the projects like Patrick just mentioned, and the ideas that are emerging from these TEDx events. The memes, the themes, and the common ideologies. The local voices that are emerging through the different TEDx events, voices we may never have heard from had it not been for TEDx. And the cross-cultural exchange of ideas. For example, TEDx today is streaming, TEDx Taipei streaming to a series of events on mainland China. And then finally, this global ecosystem of ideas and how it's really affecting the local communities. And so what I want to do with my remaining few minutes is just read a couple of these stories in the voice of the community themselves, and a couple of quotes, with the understanding that this is just a mere slither of the TEDx stories. So this is an email I received from Mazarat Dowd, who's the host of TEDxTokyo, and this email I received after she had done her second event the second year. It says, the usual villains are still there, but their voices were much lower compared to last year. The most beautiful outcome was that our venue was a low-caste school, which is around 80 years old. There are no toilets in the school, but because of TEDxTokyo, the school finally got toilets built by the community members. And it's finally getting a coat of paint too. And the best part is that one of the local politicians who represents Fatpur has also attended the event, and he has donated money, which will be used towards building 2 new classrooms at the school. And this is an attendee quote from TEDxTokyo. As a small, impoverished country, I think Macedonia needs more of TEDx. This event bolstered our confidence, our belief in human potential. We need more shining eyes, as Ben Zander put it. And then finally, I'm just going to read an email from one of my favorite TED speakers. I got this email very recently. It said, I'm sitting at the end of the world, the nearest small town over 600 kilometers away, huge oil fields surrounded by massive dunes, nothing else, with the head of the world's largest oil company and his hotshot team, a lot of very smart young kids, co-ed. And as what has most impacted the young swords in the past few weeks, not the turmoil next door, but TEDx Riyadh and TEDx Jeddah, it's what everyone is talking about. It's the lead topic on Twitter and Facebook. And so there are hundreds of these stories. Please go to our TEDx blog. It captures a few of these stories. And if you have a story of your own, please contribute it to the global community of stories. And so while TEDx was launched as this little experiment 2 years ago here, it's creating an amazing ecosystem of ideas across the planet. It's a unique network of voices, ideas, and passions, and it's connecting this amazing global community. And TEDxTokyo is key to this community. You are the founding members, or one of the founding members of this amazing global community. And so my challenge to you today is let's find a way to really leverage this community to help rebuild Japan, and please help us continue to contribute to the continuous global conversation about our shared future. Thank you.